In this video, I'm going to go through the process of cutting miters on the ends of your moldings that you've previously produced and attaching it to the box. Now, during this process, I am going to be making taking some pretty interesting shots on the camera. I'm just hoping that they work out. So if things seem a little bit different in this one, it's because of all of the different shots that I'm going to have to make. So follow along with me. This is going to be kind of fun. All right, my very first setup is your box. You should have a sanded box on all four sides. That includes the back. Everything is going to be sanded. You should have your molding, and your molding should also be finished sanded just on the details. You shouldn't need to touch this quite yet. We'll get to that, the flat surface, after it's attached to the box. But your box at this point should be completely finished sanded. If there is any other sanding that you're going to need to do, you're going to want to take care of that before doing this process. So my first step is I need to determine which one is going to be my front. This one has a very prominent knot that I want to display on the front, so I'm going to make that my front. And this one is kind of plain. It does have a knot. That'll end up on the other side, so I'm going to make this my sides. This one we're going to be splitting more or less in half. One side on here, the other half is going to go to the other side. So I want to set it up just like this. Now, for this process, what I'm going to end up doing here is that I'm going to have 45-degree miters cut that are going to come together and meet so you don't see the end grain. This is the whole purpose of this process, is so you don't see the end grain. We're going to cut the end grain at 245s. They'll come together and they'll dress up the box really nicely along the bottom. In order to start doing that, I need a pencil, and you're really not going to need a tape measure for this, but you are going to need a pencil. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the angles that I'm going to cut on the ends. I always mark it so that when I turn around and make the cuts on the miter saw, I don't get confused with what I need to do on each end. Just by turning around, you can get mixed up a little bit backwards, and I'm trying to avoid that. So I'm going to bring the camera over and get a little bit closer shot of what it is that we are trying to do with this process. So there we go. I'm going to zoom in. There we go. So what I'm doing is I drew the angle that we're going to cut on the ends. Once I have that done, I can set up here at the miter saw and I can start making my cuts from there. I'm going to start with my front. My front is going to be cut on that one end that I already have marked. And in order to make the miter, just remember, a miter cut is anything off of 90 degrees. So even if I go one way or the other a degree or two, it's still a miter. So I'm going to swing it to this side first. And in order to make that happen, I press in on this button and just make sure this is up. If it's down, it's locked in. You don't want that to be locked in. Have it up, push in on this button, and then swing it to one side or the other. We will be doing both sides during the process of this video. So I want it to lock in at 45. If it's moving at all, it's not locked in, so you don't want it to move. There's a little red thing off to the side here. You want that to be pointing at the 45. You do have an angle measuring device right here, the protractor, that will help you with that setup. Now, when it comes to cutting, I have, in this case, I'm using my left hand. If I had, and I will be doing this in just a minute with the saw on the other side, I hold it with my thumb and my index finger on both sides. This is a left and a right cutting saw. And you're going to need to be doing both when it comes to cutting your molding. So I have my thumb and index finger down here on the bottom. I don't ever push it in here at the top. The main reason being, this is a split fence. These two pieces are not on the same plane. So if I push in at the top, it's actually taking it off a vertical. I want to push it in down at the bottom up against this fence so it's more stable and more vertical. It's more accurately vertical. So I always push in down here at the bottom. And you don't want to use dainty force. You need to really force it into that fence. Otherwise, once the blade hits it, it's going to have a tendency to shift it slightly to the left. And you can actually watch it happen as you're making that cut. So to prevent that from happening, just make sure that you're using your thumb and your index finger, and you're using some pretty intense force in order to do that. So just make sure that you're doing that. And then what we're trying to accomplish is we're trying to make this bottom corner sharp. If you make this bottom corner sharp, everything above it will also be sharp because of the nature of the angle that we're cutting. So we just want to make sure that that bottom corner is sharp. If you make a cut and the bottom corner isn't sharp, just go ahead and make another cut, but don't overcut it as well. You've only got so much length here to work with. So I'm going to bring the saw blade down, and what I do is I sight through the slits in the guard, and I sight down this face, and I'm aligning this face with that bottom corner. So it looks like this. So I sight through the slits, and I'm looking down the left face of the blade. I'm going to raise this up because it wants to focus on the guard. And all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to align that edge with, this is kind of hard to micro adjust this. I want to try and align that bottom, or that left edge of the blade with that bottom corner. Okay, so I'm literally trying to get it into just one plane. And once I've done that, I can make that cut. So I'm going to sight down that surface, and I'm going to scoot it over just a little bit. If you take a little bit extra, it's honestly not going to ruin anything. You've got a little bit of extra material to play with. All right, here we go. Again, thumb and index finger pushing it pretty hard up against the fence, and a slow cut with the saw. The slower the cut, the cleaner it's going to be. And that's what we need with these cuts, is a clean cut. So here we go. I'm not going to raise the blade until it stops because I don't know what's going to happen with that little piece. This is considered a little piece. The blade, when it's slowing down, it can still grab that and it can still throw it at a very high rate of speed, and it's actually really dangerous. So I'm going to bring it up to the camera so I can show what's going on here. So if you look at this really carefully, this is a sharp bottom corner. Everything above it is going to also be sharp if you cut this carefully and accurately. So this is exactly what we want to do. Okay. All right. I'm going to set up and put it on the box. Actually, you know what? I'm not. I'm just going to put it over on the box, and I'm going to start setting up the other side. So in order to set the other side, all I have to do is depress the button, swing it to the other side, let it lock in at 45, and that's good. And I do the exact same thing on this. Hold it in, bring the blade down, and with this one, I'm going to have the right side align with that bottom corner. I'm going to overshoot it just about a 30-second. So hold it nice and tight, cut it nice and slow so it cuts clean, and then we'll see what the end result is. All right, this is my end result. This looks actually really nice. So the only point that I care about are these 2 points on the back where they meet together, and that's it. Honestly, there is nothing we can do to control anything else along this joint from top to bottom. These 2 points are the only thing that I can control. Okay, so just kind of remember that. If you have a little bit of a gap, there's not a whole lot that we can do with it. Now, from here, I'm going to come to the back, and I want to mark this for length. I do have to double check and make sure that the miter joint that I just cut is where I want it to be, and then I'm going to mark this for length with my pencil. And when I go over to the saw, I'm going to have the saw blade on the left side of the saw blade is going to be even with the mark on the left side, because there's There's that's where it's even with, is on that left side. My mark is even. All right, back at the miter saw, I'm going to bring the blade down, and I'm going to align this left side of the blade with the left side of the pencil mark. Remember, all pencil lines have measurable width to them. So if you cut to the right side, it's going to be just a little bit long. I'm going to make this cut again, nice and slow. Notice that I have it set for 90 degrees, but on the protractor it's set for 0. So I'm going to hold it with my thumb and my finger again. It looks pretty good. What I'm looking for is these 2 points to be coming together and this to be flush. Now this is really close. It looks like I cut it just a skosh short, but honestly you're not going to see it. It's not that big of a deal on this one. Besides, I might be able to cheat the front to slide it to the right just a little bit, which is going to force this to go back, and that's actually not too bad. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Okay, so then I'm starting to work on the other end. This is the leftover piece from that other side. I'm going to put it in position, and my pencil's right here. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to draw the angles, how they need to come together. So they are 245s, and I draw those angles on the ends. And then, with the front piece in position, I'm going to align this right side right where I want it to be. That looks good. And I mark it for length. And draw that angle in that direction that I need to cut, but it was already there. So I'm going to take these 2 pieces back to the miter saw and I'm going to cut them. The one thing that you need to remember is on the front, we always cut it a little bit long. If we don't cut it long and we try to cut it to the finished length on the first cut, invariably you're going to cut it short. I can't tell you how many times I've done that over my career and in my lifetime. It's just not going to end well. So we always cut the front a little bit long. Then after we cut these pieces, all of them to rough length, we sneak up on the finished length on the front. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to set up and I'm going to cut it on the miter saw. Okay, I've got both pieces here. I'm going to swing this to the other side because it's going to match my angle. So swing it over, lock it in at 45, and then I'm going to make my cut. Again, cut it a little bit long, and I'll get a close-up of what I'm talking about here in just a minute. Hold it with your thumb and your index finger, make it nice and solid so when you cut it, it doesn't slide. Here we go. This piece is small enough to where I wanted to let the blade stop. I'm going to move this out of the way, swing this around to the other side, let it lock in at 45, bring the blade down, align it with that bottom corner, and cut it. Again, that piece was small enough, I wanted to let the blade stop. Oops. All right, now, if you look at this cut, notice how the pencil line is about, it's probably more like 3/32. It's a little bit further away than it should be. But honestly, I don't care how much longer it is, it just needs to be long. And my pencil mark, that's my length, and I went substantially longer. It's probably closer to 1/8 of an inch. Again, guys, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much longer, it just needs to be longer. Okay, so I'm going to set back up over at the box, and I'll show you what this all looks like, because it is important to understand what it's going to look like at this point. Okay, I'm going to hold this as still as I can, but there might be a little bit of camera movement. I want you to notice there is a gap. The side here comes up, but you can visibly see that the front is substantially longer than the side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up at the miter saw, and I'm going to take what I refer to as nibble cuts. That's not a technical term. It's just a term that I came up that kind of gives an example of what it is that I'm trying to do. So nibble cuts are really simple to do. It's just a matter of how do you set up for it. I'm going to go right back to the miter saw and I'll show you how to make these nibble cuts. Nibble cutting is a very simple thing to do. You are taking a very, very small cut with the saw blade, and you start by bringing the blade down in its full down position. You're going to take the material and butt it up against the body of the blade. You can see there is no shadow line, which tells you that it is touching the body. I'm going to push in very firmly the material up against the fence, so I'm using my thumb and my index finger. It's not in the frame of the camera, but just rest assured my thumb and my index finger are holding this very solidly. I have to raise the blade back up, and I'm going to start it up, and I'm going to make this cut very, very slowly. The speed matters on this cut. If you don't cut slowly, the blade is just going to ricochet off the material and it will not cut. So I want you to pay attention and realize just how slowly I have to make this cut. So here we go. This is the nibble cut. Okay, I want you to notice there is a shadow line there now. That indicates that there is a gap. So it did take a little bit. If I had to guess, it's about a 32nd, maybe not quite a 32nd of an inch. That's how much it took off. Now, depending on what kind of, or not what kind, sorry, depending on which saw you're working with, it might determine how much of a nibble cut it's going to take. Because the blades, I do have different blades on these machines, so just keep that in mind. So I'm going to raise this back up, and I'm going to take this piece back over, and I want to see how much it took off. So I'm going to set over there right now. Again, you probably cannot tell that it took anything off, because it did take very little off. Now, it did, in fact, change just a little bit, because I saw it take a little bit off. So just realize that you're going to take those nibble cuts until you get the front piece, so this piece, the right length. And when I get to that point, I'll come back and I'll show you what it is that I'm looking at. Okay, so I am going to do repetitive nibble cuts until I get it to the perfect length. And when I do, I will come back. Okay, I'm back, and this is after, I can't remember, 3, 4, 5 nibble cuts. It was a little bit more than what I normally do, but it did turn out very nice. It looks great, and this is what the left end looks like. So I'm going to go to the right end and push it all together, and this is what I have here. Okay, so it looks really, really good. I really like how this turned out. My next step is I'm going to mark this for length, and I'm going to trim it off at a 90-degree angle on the miter saw. So I'm going to line it where it needs to be up front. Yep, that looks really good. So we should be nice and flush, and that looks spectacular. I love it. All right, I am going to set up over at the workbench with my parts, and I'm going to walk you through the process of gluing it and mounting it to the box. That's going to be next. So I've got my molding, my side, my front, and my other side, and I've got my box. Right now it's on its back. What we need to do is we need to drill some holes in the fronts and on the sides so that we can use some screws to attach the molding to your box along with a little bit of glue. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by putting 4 holes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice that I have 1 in each of my stiles and 2 in my bottom rail. All you have to do is evenly space them out and just do it by eye. You don't need to get a tape measure out. However, I do need to mark up a specific distance from the bottom. This you do need a tape measure for. So I'm going to measure 3/4 of an inch up, and I'm going to space out these other 2 on the bottom rail. And I'm going to do this the best that I can. Once you have all of your marks, on your box, and I'm talking front and sides. On your sides, you're going to be putting a hole in each of your one in each of your stiles and one in your bottom rail. So again, just measure up 3/4 of an inch on those, and then you'll be good to go. From me, you're going to need to get a pilot bit. This is just a 3/16 drill bit, and a countersink bit. Along with those, you're going to need to get a couple drills. So at the hand tool cabinet, you'll just get a couple of these drills out. And when you're using these, you want them to be put on number 2. That's the high speed. That's important. If you only have it on 1, it'll drill. It just goes a little bit more slowly. So what you're going to do is you're going to start with the drill 90 degrees, so perpendicular to the surface. I'm going to start it, but once you have the hole started, angle the drill away about 5 degrees and then drill all the way through it. Okay? So in practice, it looks something like this. I start and then immediately angle it away. Start it and angle it away. One more time. Start it and angle it away. Just like that. Just a word of caution. I do not want you to drastically angle it. That is not a good idea. All we're trying to do is when you put the screws in, I need you to have a little bit better angle in order to put the screws in. If your drill is flat on the bottom, it's just not an easy thing to do. So I'm just trying to give you a little bit of an ease of installing the screws from the back. Okay? So on the next one, I'm going to take my second drill and I'm going to put the countersink in. So just in case you don't know how to use this, I got it put on number 2. If you need to open it up, put the drill in reverse. So there's an arrow right here that is pointing this direction. That's a reverse, so I'm going to depress that and I'm going to open it up. Watch the things, the little 3 fingers that are in there, they're going to go back. And in order to collapse it, I push it in forward. This has got a forward arrow, so I push this one, and as I go forward, those fingers start to come out and collapse on whatever it is that you put in there. Okay, so I'm going to take it out, I'm going to back it out, put in the countersink, and then I push the forward, and I'm holding on to the chuck every time I'm making this adjustment. If you don't hold on to the chuck, it won't move controllably. And then I just click on it, and it'll clamp down on there nice and tight. And then I flip it up on its head. With all of the chips, that just needs to go away. Flip your box up on its head, and then I'm going to give it a little bit different angle here. I come from the back side. All I'm doing is I'm pushing in, I'm pulling with my left, and I'm pushing with my right. Or it could be vice versa if you're left-handed and you're using the drill left-handed. You're going to pull with your left and drill with your right and pull with your right and drill with your left and push with your left. That sounds more like it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just clicking, just gently clicking on the trigger. I'm not going full bore. I'm just gently clicking until I get to the depth that I want. So when I drill with this, I just want to bury the taper. Once I get to the end of the taper, I stop. So I'm going to do that with the rest of these. There we go. So my front is done. I'm going to pause right here, and I'm going to continue with getting the sides done, and then I'm going to set up for actually gluing the molding onto the bottom of your box. I've got my sides all drilled out along with my fronts, and just one thing, don't drill out your back. I do have students do that from time to time. If you drill out your back, you're just going to have those permanent holes that are in your back along the bottom of your box, and they don't look very attractive. You're generally not going to see them, but just don't drill there, because remember, you've only got your molding for your front and your 2 sides, so don't drill out the back. I have a drill that is set on number 1, and I have a Phillips driver put in the chuck on this one. I've got my 10 screws. They're all right here. So if you count them out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I've got my 10 screws. Everything has been pilot drilled and countersunk from the back. I have a bottle of glue, and then I have 2 of these small parallel jaw clamps. The small ones are the ones that you want to use. Don't use anything bigger than this. There's, I see 2, 4, 5 more over there. So 2 more of you would be able to do this at the same time. 3 total would be able to do this at a single time. If you use the bigger ones, they're a little bit too big for your box, and they will actually make your box tip over. So these are the ones that I'm going to recommend that you use. Open them up, but you want to make sure that your jaws are parallel. So first thing we need to do is actually close them up, right? So just hold them together, and looks like I'm going to have to do a little bit of finagling. And once they're closed and parallel, then open them up at the same time. Hold on to the handles and just open them up. That should be about 2 inches. I'm going to do the same thing on this one. I'm going to close it up. Come on. Now that they're closed, I'm going to open them up simultaneously, and there we go. That should be about right. So I've got those set. These are all ready to go. Now, when it comes to the clamping, or excuse me, when it comes to the gluing process, you want to have your molding pieces on the sides where they need to go. You're going to be using your side pieces to help you position the front. That's really important to know. But you're only going to do this one at a time, and I don't want to leave them up like that because they might fall over. The problem with these pieces of molding is because you have your sharp corners here, if they do in fact drop and you damage those, there's nothing that I can do to get those back. So be very careful when you're at this stage. If you ding them, they're yours. You really can't fix them. You'd have to replace them. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a couple beads of glue on the back of your front piece to start with. This is the piece you always start with. I'm going to put 2 narrow beads starting at the end. I'm going to come in about 5 inches. And I'm going to make 2 narrow beads. I don't come up any more than ½ inch from the bottom. The main reason being is if you were to put this on and you get glue squeeze out right up here, if you get any glue squeeze out right here, you can't remove it after it's dried, after your molding is dried and set. It's just not possible without doing some major damage to the top edge of your molding and to your box face. So if you do put too much on here, take it off. You just need to use a minimal glue. When you are putting this on, you're going to put glue on the ends where your miters are. So on this piece, you're going to put glue on both ends. On your sides, you're only going to be putting glue on the end where your miter is. You're not going to be putting any glue where the square end is cut to the back. You're only going to be putting it right here, and that's it. That's the only place you need to put it. So we're going to start. I've got my bottle of glue, and I'm going to put 2 narrow beads right here at the bottom, no more than about 5 inches long. That's about as much as you need. That looks really good. I like that amount. Now I'm going to put it in position. And what I'm looking for is to make the bottom of the box flush with the bottom of your molding. So I'm paying attention to that. And then I'm looking right here. This is where you need to be paying attention. If you remember, those 2 points, the 2 points right here are the important points of contact. You can't control anything else along the front. So what I recommend that you guys do is bring your side towards you and get everything set, or position it so you can see it better. I prefer doing it this way. And that looks really good. I like how that looks. My bottom is flush on this end, but not over on this end. I'm going to warn you right now, doing this with one person is very difficult. This is something that I strongly recommend you do in little groups. And then I'm just going to use the back of the clamp, and I'm going to use the clamp to press it down and hold it in position. And it's moving. That's pretty normal. The thing that you have to do is just fight with it. There's nothing else that you can do at this point. Keep it flush on the bottom and double check and make sure that you have your 2 points coming together. And it slid that way. So I'm going to loosen it and bring it back towards me so that it's positioned proper. Like I said, this is a struggle. This is a fight. You have to fight it. You do not want to lose this battle because it's not going to look good when it's done if you don't win this battle. Okay, that is better, but I still see a little opening that I need to close up. I'm just going to take the clamp off, and I can feel the glue starting to tack. And that's when you know that you're starting to win the battle. Once the glue starts to tack, not dry, but once it starts to tack, then you know you're going to start winning the battle. Because once the glue starts to tack, it's not going to move. Flush at the bottom. Flush at the bottom. That looks good. And yes, I like that. Okay, now I'm going to bring the other end around, and I need the other clamp. Now, one thing about the clamp placement, you do not want to cover the screw holes. So if you put the clamps right into the corner, you're going to cover those screw holes. So just double check. I am going to double check this end because I want to make sure that this is going to work as well. And that looks fantastic. All right, the moment of truth has come. I'm going to flip the box on its head. I'm going to take a drill and I'm going to put the screw on the driver. When I put my screws in, the thing that you need to remember is that all I want to do, just the same thing that I did with my countersink, is I just want to tap on the drill. I'm not being aggressive. I'm not going to go full bore. If I go full bore, and if I haven't set it already, it's on slow speed, number 1. It has to be on number 1. If you have it left on number 2, you're going to strip these screws out, and then you've got to start the process over again of pilot hole and countersink. So just tap on the drill just like what I'm doing. Just notice I am not being aggressive at this at all. I'm going to tap on it until the head of the screw sinks in the hole. Same rule applies. I'm pulling with my left, pushing with my right. If I'm left-handed, I'm going to pull with my right and push with my left with the drill. Okay, so after I get that one in, I'm going to put the other 4 in. Sometimes the driver pops out of the magnetic tip. Okay, 3 down, 1 to go. This is looking really nice. Whoops, lost it again. Once you have the screws in their holes, take off these clamps. The screws that you put in are acting like permanent clamps. So I'm going to take them off and drop them off to the side. Okay, I'm going to bring the camera around. So this is what you're looking at when the screws are in and sunk to where they need to be. Notice how the head of the screw is touching the wall all the way around. If I come down to the next one, they are all going to be the exact same. Okay, so the front is done. Now I'm going to set up and I'm going to do the sides. I'm going to mount my right side piece of molding on this face. In order to do that, I start with 2 narrow beads of glue, and these can be 4 or 5. I'm not going to be too picky. I actually like to put just a little bit of glue on the joint and put it in position. I want it to be flush. The box is here, the molding is here. I want this to be flush. And in order to keep it in position, I'm going to clamp it down. Oops. like I said, the fight is real. You gotta win this battle. If you don't win this battle, your molding is not going to look very good. Come on now. There we go. I am going to check this corner here. I want to make sure that these top edges are flush with each other, and really I could even go so far as moving it so that I can double check and make sure. And heck, that looks pretty good to me actually. If you notice there's a little bit of glue coming out, that's okay. That's easily removed, so I'm not going to worry about that. And I have another clamp. I want to put my other clamp on as well, because it's going to be a lot more stable when I go to put the screws in. Getting my screws in. Go. Okay, once I have this side in, it's honestly just a rinse and repeat on the other side. So I'm going to stop right here, and I will come back and I'll show you a couple things that I want you to be aware of, what to look for after you've attached your molding. So here we go. This is more or less the finished box with the molding on it. A couple things that you're going to do for touch-up. It's really simple to do, but just some really fine details that in the end it's going to matter. Number one, got to bring it in here really tight, unfortunately. So if you look at this, maybe I need to drop the camera down just a little bit so you can see this a little bit more clearly. Okay. If you look at this, you can see that the side here is sticking out past the front just a little bit. If you use an old sanding disc just like this and do a little bit of sanding, so I'm sanding with the direction of the grain, and a little bit up top right here because it's sticking out just a little bit right there as well. Got to come to the other side and the top as well. So I'm gonna put this really nice and tight so I can fit it into this detail. Just that little bit of sanding makes all the difference in the world. I don't feel anything sticking out past the front or the side, and that looks great. I really like that, how it turned out. When you go to use the parallel jaw clamps, there is one little thing, one little bit of advice that I need to give you as well on that. If you recall, I need to broaden this out. If you recall, we use the clamps like this. It's wider here and narrower here. Therefore, it's pinching right here at the opening, and it's grabbing onto your box right along the bottom of that detail that the shaper cut. It's holding it right here. Okay? Now, what if we did it the opposite direction? What if we had it wide here at the bottom and not at the opening where the pressure is going to be? Well, what's going to happen is if you put pressure, if you transfer it from this point to the back, what will happen is you're going to open a gap right here along the top edge of your molding. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that looks really bad. So if you notice that you have just a great big wide open gap and you can't close it up, it's all because of how you are manipulating your clamps. Okay, so just as a reminder, you want to have the pinching action be here at the opening. It needs to be narrower here at the opening rather than the back. If you can remember that, that will help make your molding application much easier and make it look a lot better when it's done. The only other thing that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to sand this bottom flat face. Remember, the only thing that's touched that is the wide belt sander, and there are sanding scratches. I can see them very prevalent right here along that face. So, and I've got the writing from the measurement from cutting it at 2 1/4. So I've got some stuff that I need to take care of with the random orbital sander. So I'm going to sand this entire flat surface. I'm not random orbital sanding anything right here, just along this surface, and I'm going to do that on the sides as well. Other than that, the molding is done. In the next video, I'm going to start setting up and working on the lid.